Hi everyone. To talk about how, by using a single backend with multiple front-end, reduce product costs, we will start to explain the usage architecture, and then our business and technical challenges, and finally the solution that we applied. Okay, but who are we? I'm Fernanda Lini, a software architect at CI&T. I started as a developer in 2004, working with level design for mobile games and developing an engine for console games. After that, I've been working with web development and since 2008, specifically with Drupal. I also worked on create a mobile bank app for a digital Brazilian bank and in a delivery app for a big international fast food company. Pedro?
Right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Pedro. I'm also a software architect here at CI&T. I joined the company in 2014, and since then, I've been working mostly with Drupal, but using Drupal as simple web applications or APIs and huge platforms using Drupal as a backend. All right, so if you could go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit really quick about CI&T, just so you guys know what we're talking about. So we are a digital agency that provides strategy, research, design, and engineering services to clients all over the world. Today, we have almost 3,000 strategists, designers, and developers. So it grew a little bit since we did the slides. We are global. We have offices in Brazil, United States, Canada, Portugal, Australia, China, and Japan. As you can see in the slide as well, we have been certified as being a great place to work 11 years in a row, which is amazing. And we have worked with some great partnerships with companies such as Acquia, Adobe, SAP, Google, as you can see as well on the bottom right. And just going quickly on the rest of the slide, we have been growing a lot, and we have been working with some huge companies, as you can see in your screen. But well, enough about CI&T and talking about the product, the problem. So Fernanda, if you could go, yes, to the next one, please. Alrighty. So this is a very simplistic vision of the architecture that we were using, but it shows the most important parts that we need to showcase today. So we had a huge portfolio of sites, and each one of them were basically a copy of one another, where you would have in each one of them the design you have on your right. So we would have a Drupal 8 application that consists of a components library. And those components were basically custom modules created using Drupal blocks. We used configs so we could use the same blocks in many applications and replicate it all across. And to achieve our design requirements, we had a custom team that controlled how each of those components would show up in the front end. So on your right, actually on your left, sorry, you see a lot of simply put boxes that would be our websites. Imagine that each one of those was a full Drupal stack with everything that Drupal requires, and pretty much a copy of one another with the that component library. With this solution in many projects, it worked really well, but we saw some challenges and some problems with it that I can go over in the next slide. Right, thank you. Okay, so here we outlined some of the issues that we had. One of them being less flexibility out of the box. Since we have all the component library created into the same platform, when we had to create something new or change something that already existed to a new application, either we had to duplicate it, so recreate the same component again and just add a few fields to it, or we had to have it updated at a platform level, which became a lot of overhead. Also, in that stack that I just showed you, we saw some performance issues with the applications that had a higher volume of accesses. Since we were using Drupal in the backend for everything, and serving all the content rendered by Drupal, when you have a high volume of accesses, unless you have some caching strategy, so just to say some examples, Drupal's cache or Redis or a CDN in front of it, you can have some serious performance issues since everything needs to be processed and rendered and all that. One other huge problem that we had was the maintenance of it all. If you imagine having 20 Drupal sites, you have to keep all 20 of them updated. So you have to update your modules in your core to make sure that you have your security updates in place. That also implied with a higher hosting cost because you need a more powerful host to be able to handle everything that you need on a Drupal site. It can't be a simple and cheap one because you need to your host needs to be able to handle all the load on your server. And then last but not least, we had a huge problem with the amount of time we were using to develop simple things. So for each clone that we ended up creating, when we needed something new, we spent a lot of time making sure that our solution was working, even though it was a copy of another one with one more field. So for each clone of the application, sometimes we spent multiple sprints to change very specific things just because it was at a platform level. So that's a high-level overview of the problems that we had, and Fernanda can walk us through the proposed solution.
So before I start to talk about solution, I need to ask sorry about my noisy neighbor. So we chose this architecture to solve our pain points that Pedro mentioned. And can you see the backend here?
Yeah, we can.
So in the backend, we decided to create a headless Drupal with content CMS to make easy the authentication with OAuth2 and the JSON API. So, for example, one of the features that the content already have configured is open API documentation, so it's helped us a lot. In the backend, we are using the JSON API, but in the front end, we use the GraphQL. I will show you after. So for this presentation, we recreate just the block types that you use in our component library and some pages only. We use the blocks. We create all the blocks in the content in the backend, and we use these, the machine name, especially this part of the machine name, as a filter in the front end, so we can filter by the page path. And our component library was made using Storybook and TypeScript. So devs and the content editors can come here and see all available options they have for components like button, for example, and our card here. Also, we enable knobs so they can see how it looks like, and if they change some options like, oh, I don't like the footer of the cards, also I want the image in the bottom of the card, you can test your options here, like change the title to see if it fits in your layout. And also the dev can come here and copy the structure of the components and use on the front end on the Gatsby site. And also we have this documentation here that can be used for both backend dev or front end to see what is the options for the card and also the type of each field. The site we develop using Gatsby and GraphQL, so it's possible to filter and get only the content that we need for the site, not all the information that you receive from the JSON API. For example, to display options for these cards, we have all in the CMS. So the editor can choose if you have this yellow footer here, if you have a button, if you have the image on button on top for the home page, for example. And for another page like this one, they can decide to have no match height here. And the 2 cards in a row. For the other page, they can decide to not have buttons and footer, and also all images on the top. And or have more cards in a row, like this page here. Or have the button and not the footer. So there's all the options are in the back end. And as I mentioned, we use the path of the page to filter the GraphQL blocks. And for example, we can have the page on CMS and get using the path like this about us. Here, it's the page, not the blocks there. And also, we can use the plain text like in this component and this profile component here, or you can get HTML like in the footer component. This is all links and the tags are in the CMS. And having this already configured in our components library and in the CMS, it's fast to create another site like this one here. That's very similar. However, with some content changes and some layout changes, we have a totally different look and feel for this site. For example, we decided that brands have a red background for cards, 100 images in all the pages. So, and this about us callout will be in the bottom, not in the top, so you can decide the difference for your site. The button back to top, it's not to have the square around them. And also, we can have the same, for example, if you have the same page, the same content shared by your site, you can just use the same content that comes from backend and apply the look and feel for your other site. And this leads us to our first game point. This is our development team. And the only Thiago knew how to create components in Storybook and develop a site using Gatsby and GraphQL. Despite that fact, after 1 week of learning Gatsby, GraphQL, and Storybook, the whole team was able to create components and replicate them in the front end. So our first point here is about the fast learn curve. The second point was about development costs. As we worked in parallel using different code base, the time used with merges decreased a lot. Our development time dropped from 2 sprints to 1 sprint, so we began in the development as well. Another game was about hosting costs. As you need only one host to the back end, and for the front end, you can use one host for most of the sites, or you can use a cheaper host, or even put the HTML files on CDN. It's drop the costs with the host as well. And since we have a static HTML being served to the users instead of a full stack that needs to process the content being served, we tend to have a better performance, which impacts SEO directly with the load time of your page. It keeps the user in the site because if the time to load is it's high, the user left your site, and convert in gains for our client. And in the security perspective, as a static count is served, it removed the need for constant update. And for example, before we have to apply security patch for Drupal for 20 sites, now you have to apply for only one. And by have the storybook, we can create different versions of the same component with the minimal code change. And it can be done in global level or in site level. For example, here for the card again, in the site one, we decided to have all the available features in the card and get this dynamic from the CMS. So we decided to get the footer, the button, the image position, everything from CMS. In the site 2, we decided to not have the option for this footer and the position of the image. So we changed this only on the site level, and it's not changing anything on the components. So you can pass in the static way here in the site level. For example, if you need a link besides this button and it should be available for all your sites, you can just change the component in the library and also in the Drupal. So if the site 1, 2, 3, 4 wants to use this link, they can add in their front end. Okay, but you also have our challenge during the development. The first one was managing the token access that we needed to get some information from Drupal, like menu. So instead of create a custom solution in all the sites that we need this, as one developer of our team, create a package in NPM and made available for community. So with this package, we be able to manage all token life. If you need access token or refresh token, or if it's expired, this package will help you. And not only with Drupal, but others API as well. So if you use Gatsby with another API, you can use this package as well. And another challenge was about language. Some of our team is not comfortable with English, and we have a lack of Gatsby tutorial in Portuguese and documentation as well. So Thiago Franquin, it's a dev from our team that teach us how Gatsby work, create a series of videos on his YouTube channel to help our team, other teams in CIT, and also the community. So if someone needs the Gatsby tutorial in Portuguese, feel free to access his channel. And finally, we decided to go with TypeScript to avoid inconsistency between the backend and what we are expecting front end. So as I mentioned before and showed, TypeScript with Storybook creates a nice documentation. So for example, if you need to create a new site, you can check there what you need, what you expect in the front end. And after create a component there, backend that can get the correct types on the backend. So say that what we have learned with this project was we know this is not a universal solution that would fix all our problems, but it is a great model when you don't need a constant update, and basically we need to create a clone of your application, just change content and look and feel. We saw that by switching to this model, the host cost reduction was a huge deal for our client. And also, since we don't have to worry about keeping multiple sites updated with security patches, we had the opportunity to use the team on things that the client really wants instead of a technical backlog. But when we note when not to use this. For example, it's important to pay attention. This solution didn't work for some large applications we had in our portfolio, where we need daily updates, and sometimes you have a lot of updates during the day, so it's not the best solution for in this case. Because the fact that since we are serving static content from an HTML document instead of rendering content from Drupal, we need to execute the build process in order to be able to export the latest content. And that sometimes took longer than we'd like to consider the build time plus the deployment of the content. So in this case, maybe we need another solution like Next.js, for example. We are studying this. Yeah.